hosting the very first panel at UPPSTART, and we will be discussing how the world is moving cashless. You've seen like recent developments just the past few days of Citibank in Australia. Certain branches are now not taking cash. The Indian government banning notes. So we were talking more about that, and also what Bitcoin and blockchain technology has a role in the cashless community. So so cashless payments are on the rise, and cash is slowly declining. And I mean, even like Sweden is such a kind of pioneer in a cashless society. I went for a flea market the other day, and people were using Swish to do payments. And as everyone knows here as well, buses, we haven't been able to pay on buses for years. And also in the entrance here, there was one, I think they were selling coffee and using Swish. So, I mean, I'd like to have your kind of opinions on what's the current trends and what's happening at the moment in Sweden and in the world.
I remember that when I came to Sweden first, that I came to the bus and I suddenly couldn't pay. It was very annoying. It was like,
you're like, what do I do?
Just got money out of my ATM. What's happening? I have a Bitcoin company, so we've been in it since 2013, looking at cryptocurrency from that point of view. And of course, recently, Riksbanken now last week announced that they were going to introduce some kind of digital currency. Yeah. And I was stating on Twitter that was, let's see what happens. And then she went on national television saying, yes, we're going to do this. So obviously, interesting things are happening, and I think we are definitely heading for a cashless society. In Sweden, of any economy in the world, is probably as far ahead as you can be. I personally think that cryptocurrency will play a role in that. Coming from a Bitcoin point of view, where in 2013 it was all about hacks and scams and people were scared of, we're slowly starting to see in developing countries especially an uptake now. So there was an interesting graph at an event where it was in Silicon Valley of our investor that was aggregating data of 4 different companies that are operating in South Korea and Africa, and we're really seeing a hockey stick in usage of cryptocurrency. So the question that I, as a company, then as an individual running this company, is asking: is it going to be, on the one hand, cryptocurrency with bottom-up adoption, or are the governments and the Riksbanken able to impose or introduce a digital currency of their own? And how would that work? And who would what would happen when that happens? So that's the interesting thing, and that is happening from my point of view.
Yeah. And what kind of policies, from SEB's point of view, are being integrated to kind of move Sweden to a cashless society?
I would actually have a hard time pointing out particular drivers, apart from Sweden being a democratized country which hasn't seen a war for 200 years. I met with Björn Segendorf at Riksbanken this spring, and he's the guy that foreign magazines and media groups call, and they ask him, what's the reason, what policies did you put into place in Sweden in order to be this far ahead? And his answer is always the same: we didn't put any policies in place. This is entirely market-driven. We haven't done anything from state or government apart from providing an infrastructure that's not even financial. I mean, personnummersystemet, the personal numbers system in Sweden and Finland, which we're a bit famous for, has been a prerequisite. But other than that, no governmental policies are driving this.
That's really interesting. So it's do you have any kind of points of view what that could potentially be, how this is all happening?
Yeah, so basically I think it's, you're absolutely right, Christian. And I think there's 2 elements to it. While we're moving, I certainly believe personally that we're moving to a cashless society. So you have the regulatory aspect, which means that cash actually is used in many cases. I'm Greek, so I do know that cash is used in black economy. The other aspect is actually cost. It actually costs around a million kronor, I believe, per branch in Sweden to handle cash per year. So this is a sizable number. So blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, so other manifestations of digital cash can really help on that. And they can really help on the cost of cash, but also on the cost of onboarding, which, I mean, that's an example now that for onboarding, Swedish banks are spending around 500 million kronor a year each. So all these aspects, blockchain technology can help. And we're certainly moving towards an era where everything is digital and actually cashless society is going to be a reality.
Yeah. And what kind of benefits is there, like the cashless? I mean, I personally think it's great, money, cash actually feels a bit like, old school. But like, what's the actually benefits of a cashless community or society?
Yeah, I'm supposed to answer that one.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask any Bitcoiners when they're using cryptocurrency, that could be a lot of privacy. So the interesting aspect, what I think about introducing a digital currency from a government point of view, or like Riksbanken,
Exactly.
Is that they're actually trying to create transparency in what is now in cash. You cannot trace it, so you cannot tax it. So how do you dealing with all of this money that you can really track? So the introduction from a cryptocurrency point of view of a Riksbanken coin is to, of course, the optimization of like not having to deal with the paper and printing the money. So there's a cost saving factor, but there's also traceability in that and taxability in that. So from a government point of view, it makes a lot of sense. And then from a usability point of view, obviously it's quick, it's instant. What the question I asked though, as a citizen, and you might want to ask yourself, why would I need a digital coin in this? If we're talking specifically about the cryptocurrency initiative of Riksbanken, why would I need that as opposed to what SEC is today? It is already digital, right? I can use Swish, I can use the bank account. So I'm in the cashless society and where we're heading to. I'm still not certain what role different parts of it plays and how it will play out. But certainly, from a convenience point of view, yeah, I want to swipe my phone over RFID and pay and not have to worry about anything. So in that sense, the benefits from a usability point of view are there. From a consumer and a privacy point of view as a citizen, I think there are a lot of aspects still that we need to consider.
Yeah, so for example, so personally I'm like, yeah, that's great, it makes so much sense to cashless, but then also I don't think, I've had a conversation with my mum, and she's like, no, sounds great, what would be the downsides? I mean, and I don't think many people think about that, but what's the actually downsides of being completely...
So actually there are some downsides.
Yeah.
So the downsides are that the control that, for example, it depends on the manifestation, obviously, of digital cash. In certain manifestations, the control that the government can exert on the digital currency can be quite stifling for the economy. To give you an example, it's cash, even though it carries many, let's say, evils with it. It was also something that was used widely in Greece when capital controls were imposed. So that is actually something that it can be a drawback, and very much you have to put your faith, let's say, again, depending on the manifestation, on the monetary system and the government, that basically they're not going to abuse the power you get in terms of controlling the digital currency, but also controlling how it actually flows through the economy.
I guess you could talk about comparing free speech to money, or what you do with your funding. It's a way of expressing yourself. I want to fund this project. I want to invest into solar power. I want to invest into coal power. I want to buy this. I want to show my gratitude. I want to plant seeds for new trees in Africa or something. And having someone tell you what you can and cannot spend on, that's, well, a violation of the Free Spending Act, which we don't have, but maybe we should have it. Free speech, free spending.
Yes, so if you look back at what money originally was in terms of gold, and you had the introduction of different currency and paper, it wasn't necessarily issued by a government, so anyone could spend money freely. And then slowly but surely you had the introduction of central banking, and then when digital currencies tried to create a freedom of money with e-gold in the 90s, what actually prevented that money to break through was that it was a centralized authority. So the regulators could go there and shut it down. So the introduction of cryptocurrency is that counter movement now, where anyone can, pick up their phone and download a Bitcoin wallet, and they have essentially a bank in their mobile phone. And for many people living in, developed countries, that's not really an issue. Like, they don't really think about monetary policy, like how an interest rate and inflation impacts you and your purchasing power. But if you're living in, let's say, Argentina, where they have hyperinflation, then it's a real way for you to protect your purchasing power. So that's what we're seeing now in the developing countries, and where the nascent adoption is in those geographies now happening and taking place. Whereas, from a Sweden point of view, you have everything is fine, and you have your interest rate, and you're paying, and you don't have to worry about money so much. Of course, 2008, everybody was wondering what's going to happen now. But unless you feel that personally in your purchasing power, then you're not so much concerned about, like, what does it mean when, I have to have my bank account with a bank, and why do I need to have a bank account? And as a company, we've experienced that. So for me, I was living that same life as a Dutchman, then moving to Sweden. But when we started this company, it became very tangible, where we were trying to open up bank accounts to help people buy and sell cryptocurrency, and every single bank said no to us. And then you quickly.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, there was reasons for it. So there are reasons why that didn't happen. But as a company that's trying to build a legitimate business, and we were doing every KYC AML policies that you can, follow in European legislation, you suddenly find yourself in a place where you can run your business because banks can't open up your bank accounts, right? So we ended up having Handelsbanken, so it all ended up well.
You guys were really early, so
Go ahead.
we're trying to open up things from the inside now, but
yeah. And the same happened with the gambling industry, of course. And you can argue how legitimate is the gambling industry, like that they're preying on people's urge to gamble.
Yeah.
But as a business or as a private individual, people's accounts were closed down, and you just see that the system of that you're systematically denied the means to interact monetarily with other people is hindered in that way. So that is freedom of information. What's the internet? Freedom of money is why people are saying it's cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin has been having sort of a branding issue, and
yes.
it wasn't until me myself started researching it that I sort of was able to see through the media reports and the magazine articles on Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really something completely else.
If we take a step back, so I think a lot of time when I talk to people about Bitcoin and blockchain, they're like, yeah, no, I heard about it, I kind of know. But then people they give you that face of, what? And you're like, so can we just very quickly, what is actually Bitcoin and blockchain technology, and what's the difference? Because people.
Wow.
You want to give it a jab there?
Thank you very much.
I spoke too much already.
Back here and,
So I can try to do this in. We have 15 minutes. I can do it in 2 minutes. Blockchain explained and Bitcoin explained. So essentially, what happens is that blockchain technology, essentially, what it is a very clever manifestation of a database.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I'm not going to go into specifics because it's going to take us around an hour to go into specifics. But very high level, it's essentially a very clever database. Now, what Bitcoin is actually a digital currency, and it uses blockchain, which is the database or ledger, to essentially record all transactions that happen on the digital currency. Now, obviously, that sounds very easy, and some people could have invented that back in the 80s, but there are quite a few nuances that make it so, in a way, technologically beautiful. So what happens is that the way it's built, no one can randomly print its own money, his own money, or her own money. So basically, there's a very identifiable and clear way of how you create new currency in Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies as well. But also another thing is that you cannot double spend. So I cannot come to you, Yasmin, and say, oh, here's 10 Bitcoin, just give me a very big drink, I guess, with 10 Bitcoin, and then go to someone else and again spend the same 10 Bitcoins. No. So essentially, this is what it is. Blockchain is an amazing manifestation of a database or a ledger, and Bitcoin essentially is transactions recorded on that amazing manifestation of a database.
I think sometimes it's easier to talk about what does the blockchain do instead of what it is, or trying to explain how it works. And from that point of view, the blockchain, it digitizes trust. Now, remember what the internet did, or what the web did some 20 years ago. It reduced the margin cost of communication to near zero. So I could send a message to anyone in the world for basically no money at all, which made the amount of messages flowing to and through across the globe totally explode. And we've seen maybe 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 businesses completely get disrupted and changed, and are now starting to evolve and come up on the other side. blockchain does the exact same thing for transaction. It lowers the cost of transaction to near zero. So this unleashes micropayments and crypto financial products, and basically anything that can be digitally owned will get disrupted in one way or the other. And this, along with 3D printing, for instance, which does the same thing for manufacturing, reduces the margin cost. The margin cost is the cost of producing one more of the same to near zero. So these three, along with renewable energy, would probably start what we like to call the third industrial revolution. So eventually we'll get to a place which no one still can imagine what it will look like, but we'll see it in maybe 10 or 15 years.
So what may I add on to that? So what was interesting, in the early days of the internet, they actually wanted to have a financial protocol. But they weren't able to implement that because you had a central point of attack. I come back to that. And that's why PayPal ultimately built their business in a whole different way that they wanted to in the end. And it's only because we have now the capacity with cryptocurrency that you can finally transfer value over the internet knowing that there is no copy. So the ledger, the database, is actually very important. You can now register something and then you can transfer that ownership to somebody else instantly at a fraction of the cost, globally, with no interference, and it's decentralized. And that means that, for instance, as an example, if I were to send you a document in the past, let's say an important attachment, then you wouldn't know if I had a copy of that on my computer. Like, that's the double spending problem. That is what's now being solved. You know that when I transfer this to you, that's the only copy. So that opens up this whole mechanism of value transfer over the internet that just didn't exist before. And that can be in the token manifestation of Bitcoin, it's a currency, but it can be any type of assets, right? So you can have any kind of value now moving over the internet instantly, globally, at a fraction of a cost.
And actually not even, it doesn't have to restrict itself to value as well. It could be any, for example, very important document. It could be even smart contracts, essentially programs that interact with the users directly. Yeah. So it's like OTC, over-the-counter derivatives, all very complex financial instruments can actually be implemented on a blockchain.
And what does the future look like in a cashless society with Bitcoin and blockchain technology?
Who dares first?
Yeah. It's a big one.
That's interesting. The future in 2 years or in 20 years?
5, 10, you pick what's...
Yeah, I would imagine that we who've done a Bitcoin transaction, we've seen the light, at least what transactions will look like in 5 years. The interesting thing about the Bitcoin ecosystem is that it's driven by QR codes. And QR codes can be printed on paper or on billboards or anything, as opposed to NFC terminals or payment terminals. So I would imagine that in a few years we would have a banking app or a blockchain app that can read QR codes and let us spend money and receive money at any instant, anywhere, anytime. It might be a billboard in the subway, or it might be a QR code in a magazine. Scan this code to start your 6-month subscription, or scan this code to take part of the EPO of this company, or scan this code to put in an advert for your already used shoes, or whatever.
Or during a revolutionary protest, like in the Ukraine, there were actually protesters holding up a QR code.
Yeah,
that really happened. Yeah. So in a way, that reality is already here. So people were able to donate to this QR code that people in the audience were holding up. So it's amazing.
That is amazing. I haven't heard that. Cool.
No, it's been a while ago, but during the Ukraine the revolution, there were protesters because they didn't have access to the banking system. So another way for them to raise money for the revolutionary cause of overtaking the government there they hold up QR codes. So I don't know how much was donated through that method, but
That is so interesting.
But it was cabled over the TV networks, or
yeah. So and there were also photographs, so anyone could look at the QR code from anywhere in the world and donate
actually,
to that person.
That's
like,
amazing.
That's
really
futuristic,
amazing.
Yeah.
But actually, Christian, you touched upon something which is going to be very important, speaking about the future now of cashless society, which is the micropayments aspect.
Yeah.
It basically enables payments between machines.
Yeah.
So essentially what will happen is that our, let's say, possessions, our machines, will actually interact with each other without us having to do anything about this. And they will be interacting continuously with each other with micropayments that can be a fraction of what actually is a payment today. I think Visa, it costs them around, and I could be wrong, please correct me, Christian, I think it should be above 60 cents or something, a payment for them to make any, let's say, to have any value in processing it. 60 cents is actually not such a small payment. So again, with micropayments, you have a continuous transaction between machines that identify themselves between them. Again, I don't have to do anything. And that actually can only happen, can only manifest itself with a cashless society, very much based on actually on blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies.
That and microtransactions is a direct effect of lowering the margin cost for committing transactions to near zero. So today we're getting our salary once a month. We pay moms every month or every third month. We pay our electricity bill typically once a month. If payments would be free, we would be able to pay our electricity bill or receive money for producing electricity once a minute.
Yeah.
Or we could get paid once an hour. We could pay our income tax in the same instant that we get paid ourselves. We could get automated payment streams. So if there are a lot of startups here today struggling with producing both a cash flow statement and a budget, a result budget, those will be the same document in the future.
I think that's really, that's a really interesting point. And as we're running out of time, I would like to ask the audience if anyone has some questions. Don't be shy. There we go. Do you want?
There's somebody running with a microphone.
Thank you. Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Hey. You mentioned it, Africa as an example. I'm from Somalia, and it's been cashless there for a while. Actually, people don't use cash anymore. We use our mobile phones.
Yeah.
And when I realized it is that the government over there doesn't regulate this mobile payments, which make it really easy to adopt. And it's also not based on the internet. So you don't actually need internet connection to pay with your mobile phones. Do you see, like in Sweden, like the government being the problem, or that the barrier to entry, like we have a switch, but it takes so many steps to actually activate it. But like in Somalia, you just need a SIM card. That's all you need, and you can already send money to the next shop. So, is it the government or is it the barrier, like to enter that's hard now?
So you can answer from banking perspective, but I mean, what happens in Somalia and other countries in Africa is that they're skipping the step of having bank accounts and they go straight to mobile banking, right? So you're dealing with two completely different infrastructures and how the society is built. In Sweden, you have a very strong internet penetration, both on mobile as well as at home, where people have broadband connections. So it's just a different population that uses it in different ways. It's not like you wouldn't be able to go straight to mobile, but those type of payments are not resonating, I guess, with the general public in Sweden. So I don't think there's any policy hindrance in that adoption.
Well, we have a KYC, Know Your Customer, and AML, Anti-Money Laundering regulation in place. And those are there for a reason, because we've seen what happens when they're not there and what kind of society that would build for us. So eventually, yeah.
have any?
No, it's actually, yes, that's a very good point, actually. That's why KYC, though, I mean, all these things can be transferred as well, can be made much easier than they are today as well. So basically, we could actually have a much more seamless system than you see Swiss today. But then again, it has to be regulated by someone. So this is actually the regulation, and it's something that we see, I mean, even to the point when you went to open the bank account, to the way that, cryptocurrencies are actually seen by banks and regulators, central banks and regulators in each one of the European countries. This is something that we have to live with. And this actually is a reality. I mean, blockchain is an amazing technology. Now, taking a step back, we're starting, many people want to start a business, do amazing things with the technology, but we always have to remember that we operate in a legal framework. So we always have to remember that whatever we build has to be compliant and operate within the certain legal framework. So it is going to be, we'll have to actually abide by some rules, but hopefully it's going to be much more seamless in the future.
Thank you. One more there. Yep. 1 second. You get the microphone. Thank you.
No, there has been a lot of talks about blockchain or cryptocurrency over GSM network. I mean, with the internet infrastructure in some countries, I mean, GSM mobiles are disappearing, but still, is it an infrastructure worth investing on, or do you see some future cryptocurrency over GSM?
I see a future for mesh networks, right? So if you look at the cryptocurrency protocol now, it's reliant on an internet connection, as was pointed out. So any connection that either goes over mobile, which companies in Africa, there's a company called Atlas that's actually doing that, rolling that out over the mobile network. And then there are people contemplating how about you can have a digital currency or cryptocurrency over a mesh network. And in Asia, there has been, during the student protest, I think in Hong Kong it was, there was the rise of a mesh network messaging app, right? So it's an on-the-go network that transfers the communication between participants, as opposed to any kind of overarching architecture like a mobile network or an internet connection that we could taken down. So yes, mobile, it's already happening, especially in the African continent. But networks may emerge as well, which I find quite interesting.
So one more hand there. No, here. No. Oh. Sorry. Okay, take that and then there, and then that's perfect. Thanks.
I have seen in Bangladesh we have a company called bKash, which help people to transfer money using their mobile, but they take a charge for it, like for 100 crown or 100 taka, how much they take charge. But for Swiss, how they manage their income? Because they don't take charge. So if I send 10 crown, another person get 10 crown. So how this Swiss system survives?
That's, from a banking perspective, that's the downside of being so far in the payment industry as we are. We're not making money on payments anymore. We used to be able to give the customer a good service, namely committing or carrying out a transaction. And back in time, that was hard and that was filled with risk, which you had to mitigate, and the banks would really solve something. Today, we have the infrastructure, but since customers are committing the payments themselves, there's really no big reason, if we look towards the future, why the bank should provide the infrastructure for payments.
Okay. And then just one very last question. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's important to make a distinction between a cashless society and a digital cash society.
Absolutely.
Because those are very two different scenarios,
Yeah.
and people seem to be like very confused about them. Because payment methods like Swish here in Sweden or M-Pesa in Kenya or PayPal, they're just methods
Yeah.
for digital payments. But blockchain-based currencies, they actually revive cash. They bring it back in a new digital form.
Perfect. That's a great way.
Good point.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and applause to the panelists.
Good work, guys.